first time I had sleep paralysis was about 6 months ago. It started off with no hallucinations, but progressively got worse. I felt pressure on my chest and I had difficulty breathing to start off with. I read that sleeping on your back is a big trigger for it, so I started sleeping on my side too. That seemed to help for a little while until about 2 months ago. I felt something tugging on my arm trying to turn me onto my back, and it was tugging hard. The most terrifying experience of my life, until about a week later, when I saw a shadow man. Long thin head, red eyes, 3 long fingers on each hand, and a bunch of wispy tendrils floating behind him. I quickly shut my eyes, trying to forget what I saw, and then when I opened them again, he rushed towards me and reached out, screaming. I tried telling myself it wasn't real, but I just didn't believe it. I thought he could only move if I looked, and if he touched me, I would die. Like I said, the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. When I finally woke up, he had left, but the terror remained. I didn't sleep that whole night. I was terrified of the dark. I kept my lights on and just sat in the corner of my room so I could see the whole thing, and waited for the morning. Even though I knew what sleep paralysis was, I was convinced I was becoming schizophrenic. With the help of coffee, I stayed awake for another night, and on the 3rd day, I saw him again, but whilst awake. I had just gone up to brush my teeth, and he was stood at the bottom of the stairs. The fear I felt was the purest emotion I will probably ever feel. Nothing compares. I feel like right now, I could be getting kidnapped with a gun in my face, and it would still be nothing compared to this. I thought I was possessed. Sleep deprivation also causes delusions, and a genuine belief that this stuff is real. I was able to sleep with the lights on eventually. I slept for 16 hours straight, and the ordeal was finally over. My God. I read about it after that, to just focus on how it wasn't real, and now I know a few ways to get out of it, and I even learned how to lucid dream from it. It isn't real, it can't hurt you, so try not to be afraid. I know it's hard, but the more you panic, the worse it's gonna be. Just try and relax. I was lying in bed at night when I realized my body was rigidly locked in place. It was extremely uncomfortable. I tried moving around, but my body started rising off the bed, just a few inches. It was a terrifying sensation, but it did wake me up. Such a relief, it was just a weird dream. Suddenly though, I was rigid again, and there was an eerie green glow outside my window, and then I woke up again. That was disturbing. I'd somehow been dreaming again, with no recollection of falling back asleep. Suddenly I was even more rigidly locked up than before, floating so far off the bed I was almost at the ceiling, and the eerie green glow was brighter than ever. I panicked, and finally woke up. Again. This time I was actually awake. Sleep paralysis within sleep paralysis within sleep paralysis. I was dreaming of being exactly where I was in my own bed at night, within the same dream, within the same dream. I remember waking up for no reason whatsoever. No loud noise, no touching on my body that makes me wake up, just complete silence. I sat up just thinking to myself that maybe I was thirsty or had to piss, but something just felt very odd, a feeling that I've never had before or since. I can't even explain the feeling, but certain people know the exact feeling I'm talking about. If I had to put it into words, all I would say is pure dread. I felt if time simply didn't exist. I almost felt like the entire world just stopped. It even felt like my clock was frozen in time. I remember sitting up in a daze. As I sat up, I turned my head to the left of me, looking out of my bedroom doorway. As I peeked through, I saw a man standing there just staring at me. He had to be around 7 feet tall, and I'm not even joking here. This man wasn't hollow looking at all, no ghostly look whatsoever. He looked just like a human, completely solid, just standing there and staring at me. I remember seeing the detail in the clothes and everything. He had on black boots, kind of like Doc's. He had faded blue jeans and a huge puffy jacket. It was very odd, since it was the middle of summer, and even at night it can get warm in California. The jacket had a hood that was over his head. The odd thing is I couldn't see his face at all, even with the dim blue light lighting him up. His face was just black, no facial features or anything. Just a complete dark void where his face was supposed to be. As I sat there staring at him, I was completely frozen. Not making a sound, I was washed over with this confusing feeling mixed with fear. I remember us just looking at each other for what seemed like minutes, but was probably more like 30 seconds. As I was looking at him, I just felt terrified. I then remember all of a sudden just knocking out. I was staring at him and then just slowly laid back down. Then nothing. Just KO'd instantly. Complete darkness. I've been struggling with stress and depression. My mind won't stop racing with horrible thoughts, and as a result, I've developed mild insomnia. I couldn't sleep last night, so I turned on a show to distract me. A half hour had passed, and then an hour, or so I thought. I watched as the sun suddenly began rising, but a moment ago it was only 2 a.m. My head began to hurt, and the lights in the room flickered a bit. It became hard to breathe, and I thought I was dying. I woke up suddenly after violently shaking my head. I was scared for the first time in years. I trembled with fear, unable to sit up. My eyes glossed over, and I couldn't even blink, though it felt like I was. I worked up the strength to lift my hand, but it didn't feel like my own when I looked at it raised out in front of me. I glanced around, and the whole room looked like a slideshow. Nothing moved, but when I attempted to blink, the room changed slightly. It was morphing into an unrecognizable place. Suddenly, there was a loud rumbling sound, and all the lights went out. And then I woke up again, terrified. I couldn't distinguish this nightmare from the waking world. My roommate came down the stairs to ask me what was wrong because he said I had been screaming for him. His daughter had followed behind, and then asked me for a soda like she always does. I weakly pointed to a bottle and said that she could have it. Her face lit up and she smiled. I told him that I needed help because I couldn't move, and he extended his hands. I grabbed his hand, and then it felt like I was being electrocuted. His eyes suddenly turned black, and his look of concern turned into an evil grin. I freaked out and let go as he started to growl, the low rumbling sound of a predator preparing to attack. My limp body fell back, and my head slammed against the headboard. I lay there helpless, my head throbbing with pain, and I still can't breathe. I roll out of bed with the little strength that I have left, and I can feel him grab my feet and begin to drag me away. His fingernails were digging into my ankles, the floorboards scraping my back, and I'm being dragged across the splintering wood floor. His daughter is just standing there in the corner, giggling, asking if she can play with us. Her little body was getting smaller and smaller as I was sucked into the eternal abyss. The light all fades away, but the echoes of the growling remain. I wake up for the final time. Eyes crusted, body aching, and my cat is sitting at the foot of the bed, patiently waiting for her morning meal. I sit up and stare blankly at the rays of sunshine peeking through the window. I inhale deeply and then exhale, still shaking. The nightmare was over. I began my morning routine and everything was normal, until I step outside for some fresh air and a wave of dread washes over me. That same feeling you get when someone is following you, but you can't hear them or see them. I shake the feeling and start walking to work. I approach the main road and the feeling of dread rushes back intensely. Now I can't help but having the thought that I died last night. This depiction of the waking world is wrong, but I can't figure out how to explain it. Am I dead? Is this real? Am I a lifeless corpse still laying in my bed, my cat waiting for me to get up and feed her? My head begins to throb every time I think about it, and I'll never know the truth, and that's terrifying. I got comfortable, fell asleep, and woke up in the middle of the night. I opened my eyes and looked around. It was all I could do. I had never heard of sleep paralysis at the time, so I didn't know what the hell was happening. And then I saw what looked like a shadow walking around. No, teleporting around. It teleported to me and leaned down its head right above my face. Then it climbed onto my chest, and I felt an immense pressure there. I assumed it all actually happened until I heard about sleep paralysis, and that a lot of people have had almost the exact same experience. For a long time, me and my dad thought I was seeing a ghost that day, but it was just my mind making things up that would haunt my nightmares forever. After climbing on my chest, the shadow teleported to my sister's room and then teleported out, walking into the bathroom. Then it turned into a dog, and the dog was barking at me, but there was no sound. It was like someone had muted him with a TV remote. Then he disappeared entirely, and I never saw him again. I then forced myself to slightly wiggle my toes and slowly try to move the rest of my body. It worked, and I got up. I was lying down in my bed when I heard some noises, but just assumed it was my cat running around and didn't really pay that much attention to it. I also noticed that my window blind was a little open, but just thought I forgot to close it. As I'm trying to get up to close my blind, I notice that my body is very heavy. I try again, but I don't move at all. At the same time, the noise outside my room starts becoming louder and closer, and it sounds like loads of people whispering, but very, very loudly. I start getting really confused and kind of scared, thinking that I could be getting robbed. I try to reach for my phone to light up the room, but I get reminded that I can't move. At this time, I start getting very scared. A few seconds later, I hear the door latch, and it slowly begins to open, revealing a shadowy figure. I tried asking who was there, but my mouth didn't respond. I start to freak out and can hear my heart beating insanely fast. I want to scream, but I can't. The shadow slowly moves across the room, getting near my bed. The whispers coming from the creature get louder and clearer. I can almost distinguish what some of the voices are saying. The shadow bends over the bed, and between all the whispers, I can clearly hear my father's voice.
Want some peanuts?
I stare at it and get obnoxiously confused, when suddenly I notice my room is completely dark, the door is shut, and there's complete silence. I'm still scared as fuck, but somewhat relieved, and I notice that I can move again, but I decide not to, as that thing could still be around. This is the worst one so far. It was early hours in the morning. I had woken up from a deep sleep and was trying to fall back to sleep again. I was lying on my back completely paralyzed. I could see my whole room, but my eyes felt shut. I could not move my body or shut my eyes, and I could hear really loud muffled whispering. I couldn't understand a word of it though, it just sounded muffled, like the volume my earphones would sound on the highest volume. The loud whispering kept coming and going, and then suddenly a man with brown hair and a massive scar on his face came running towards me. He had a cream-colored vest top on with gray cargo trousers. He was very muscly and was dripping with sweat. He came out of nowhere, and so quickly, and then before I knew it, he was on top of me, shouting with his hand over my mouth and nose. He was pressing down so hard that I couldn't breathe at all. I could feel his hand over my face, and he was pinching down on my nostrils. I literally felt like I couldn't breathe, and he was going to kill me. My body was trying so hard to push him off of me, but I was completely paralyzed. I felt like I was squirming from side to side, like I was trying to save myself from suffocating. This felt like it was going on for ages. I suddenly felt my body jolt and move to the side, so that my body was now laying sideways. My eyes were then covered with darkness, but they were still open. A silhouette of a little boy came from my eyeballs. As he literally walked from my head, I could see him float from my eyes and into the mirror on the wardrobe beside my bed. It was completely terrifying, and I screamed so loudly at the top of my lungs, I instantly woke up and turned on my lights in fear of waking up my family. It turns out I didn't actually scream, but it felt so real. My mom was actually in the shower getting ready for work as she has early shifts, 4 or 5 a.m., and I could hear the sound of her shower throughout the whole experience. I was sleeping by myself in my grandparents' basement during some holiday. I woke up in the middle of the night to some little girl's voice saying my name over and over and over again, saying,
"Where are you?"
Then I can hear her slowly walking down the stairs. It was a really old house, so I heard it creaking each time, and the voice was getting louder and louder and louder. Then I saw her silhouette standing in the doorway. She was this super skinny little girl with really long, messy hair. She just stood there and stared at me for what felt like forever. I was trying to do anything I could to get up or yell for someone, but I couldn't move, and I thought it was just from being so scared. Finally, she lunged at me, and right before she got me, I woke up. Probably one of the scariest experiences I've ever had. By far the most terrifying instance was when I was in my college dorm. It was dark in the scene. The only lighting in the room was a thin sliver of light that came from the hallway through the bottom opening of the door. I was sleeping soundly, and then woke up suddenly as if from a nightmare. I tried catching my breath and then collecting myself to go back to sleep. Once I put my head back down, my heart sank when I suddenly heard heavy breathing. I looked over at my roommate thinking it was him, and I put my head down again, but it kept getting closer and louder. In my uneasiness, I scanned the room with my eyes only to see a tall, shadowy figure in the right corner of the room. It began laughing hysterically in a distorted and demonic fashion. I tried to scream and yell for my roommate, but I didn't have a voice. A sudden force then laid me flat on my bed, and no matter how much I tried to get up, I couldn't. I peered over and watched the figure jump onto my roommate and literally and brutally tear him limb from limb. I tried to avert my gaze, but it made me watch. I still remember the sound of my friend choking on his own blood as he was devoured alive. Realizing that this was likely a sleep paralysis experience, I tried to collect myself and kept saying it's almost over. But the figure, now looking at me and slowly approaching my stiff body, began touching my face with its bloody, wretched, bony fingers. It licked my cheek and started screaming things in my ear while surrounding laughter crushed my body. But before it could escalate, it was over.